Hi, today we're going to be learning about finding inputs, outputs, and rules for functions. We're going to start off by talking about what functions are. A function is a relationship between two variables where each input has exactly one output. The input value, which is often called x, is the number that you start with. The input values are not restricted to natural numbers. They can be integers, including negative numbers, or rational numbers, including fractions. So functions are very similar to patterns, but with patterns, you can only have natural numbers for your term numbers. Whereas with functions, you can have any input value. You can have negative numbers and you can have rational numbers, including fractions. Okay, then we also have our output values. The output value is often called y, and it is the result of applying the function's rule to the input. The rule, or equation or formula, is the algebraic expression that tells you what to do to the input to get the output. Now let's have a look at different ways of representing functions. If we take the function, which has the formula y equals 2x plus 3, it can be represented in different ways. It can be represented in the form of a table where you've got your input values, your x values, and your output values for those inputs. So for this particular function, for the input value -2, your output value will be -1. If your x value is -1, your y value will be 1. If your x is 0, your y will be 3, and so on. Okay, so a function can be represented in a table. It can also be represented using a flow diagram, where you have your inputs over here, which go into the middle, which tells us what to do to those inputs, and then you have your outputs on this side over here. So for this input, we apply the rule and we end up with this output. Okay, so it can be represented in a flow diagram. It can also be represented algebraically, where this is the rule or equation or formula. And it can also be represented in the form of a graph. Okay, so it can be represented visually on the Cartesian plane. Right, now let's have a look at an example. In this example, we have a function that's been represented in a flow diagram. We've been told that the equation is y equals -2x plus 9, and we need to work out the values a, b, c, d, and e using this equation and the values that they've given us. Okay, so let's go and have a look at how we would do this question. Okay, so here I've got my equation. So the first one that we need to work out is a. That is an output value where the input value is -11. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the equation and I'm going to put the -11 in place of x because it's an input. So I'm trying to work out a, which is going to be my output. So it's going to be a equals -2 multiplied by the input, which is -11, plus 9. Now we need to go and solve and work out what a is. So -2 times -11 is positive 22 plus 9, and that gives us 31. So that means that a is 31. Right, now let's go and work out b. b is also an output, so it's going to be b equals, and then I've got my equation, -2 multiplied by the input for b is -8. And then plus 9. Now we're going to go and work that out. So -2 times -8 is positive 16 plus 9, and that gives us positive 25. Okay, then the next one we need to work out is c. Now for c, it is an input. So we are going to have our output value that they've given us on this side over here equal to -2, and then x is being replaced by c plus 9. And now we're going to go and solve for c. So now I'm going to take the 9, get rid of it on this side by subtracting, so I subtract by 9 on this side as well. So 15 minus 9 gives us 6 equal to -2c. Divide by -2, and that means that c is equal to 6 divided by -2 is -3. So c is -3. Okay, then we're going to go and work out what d is. Now d is an output value again, so it's going to be d equals -2 multiplied by the input for d is 3. So -2 multiplied by 3 plus 9, that gives us -6 plus 9, which is 3. And then the last one we have to work out is e, which is an input value again. So the output value for e is -7. That's equal to -2 and then we're going to put in e for x plus 9, and now we're just going to solve for e. So we just subtract 9 on both sides. That gives us negative 16 equals negative 2e. And if I divide by negative 2, then e is equal to positive 8. And that's what you should get for that. Okay, so now I'm going to give you some that you're going to do for yourself. The first one that you're going to do for yourself is this one over here. It's similar to the last one. You also have the function being represented in the form of a flow diagram. You need to work out the values of a to e. I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this question. Okay, so let's see what you should have got for that. Right, so we're starting off with our equation, y equals 6x minus 4. The first one we need to find is a. That is an output value, so it's going to go in place of the y in our equation. So a is equal to 6 multiplied by the input value that gives us a, which is negative 6 minus 4. So then I have 6 times negative 6 is negative 36 minus 4 gives me negative 40. So a is negative 40. Then b was an input value, so we're going to have our output value, which is negative 28, equal to 6, and we're replacing x with b, minus 4. Now I'm going to get rid of the 4 over here by adding 4 on both sides, so that gives me negative 24 equal to 6b. Then I divide by 6 on both sides, and I end up with b equal to negative 4. Okay, then next is c, which is an output value again, so that's going to be c equals 6 times the input value, which is 0, minus 4. So that's 0 minus 4, which is negative 4. So that means that c is negative 4. Then we're going to go on to question or to d. which again is an input value. So our output value, our y value is 26 equals 6 multiplied by d minus 4. Now to solve for d, take the 4 across and we add it on both sides. That gives us 26 plus 4 is 30 equal to 6d, and we're going to divide by 6, and that gives us d equal to 5. Okay, so your d value is 5, and then the last one, e, is an output value, so it's going to be e equals 6 multiplied by the input value, which is 9, minus 4, so that gives us 54 minus 4, which is 50. So your e value should have been 50. So that's what we should have got for all of those. So A was negative 40, B was negative 4, C was negative 4, D was 5, and E was 50. Okay, so now you're going to go on to the next one. Now the next question is being presented in the form of a table, and for this one you've been given the equation over here, and you've been given only input values. You need to work out all of the output values for the input values that you've been given, for all the x values. Okay, but this one's a little bit more tricky because you have a fraction in your equation. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this question as well. Okay, so let's go through that and see what you should have got. Okay, so here's our equation, y equals half x plus 2. The first one we have to do, we're working out a. Now remember I said all of these are outputs, so it's always going to be in place of the y in our equation, and we're putting in the inputs that they gave us. So the first one for a, the input is negative 2. So that's half times negative 2 plus 2. So now what you need to do is remember when you are multiplying, it's the same as of. So you can think of this as half of negative 2. It's a positive times a negative is negative, and then half of 2 is 1. Okay, you can also think of it as this is 2 over 1, and then the 2 and the 2 over here cancel. 2 goes in there once, 2 goes in there once, and you end up with 1 over 1, which is just 1. Okay, plus 2, and that gives us 1. So A is positive 1. Okay, then for B, we have half multiplied by the input for B is negative 1 plus 2. Okay, so now this one, when you're multiplying a positive by a negative, it's negative, but then half times 1 stays half. So it's negative half plus 2. So now we need to add or subtract over here negative half from 2. Or we need to subtract half from 2. So that's going to be negative half plus, if I change this to have the same denominator, it's 4 over 2. So it's 4 minus 1 is 3 over 2. Or you could have just said 2 minus a half is 1.5. Okay, so you could have written that as 1.5 as well. Okay, so that's question B, or that's value B. Then for C, we have a half multiplied by the input value, which is 0, plus 2. And anything times 0 is 0, so that's 0 plus 2, which is 2. So our C value is 2. Right, now we're going to go and do D. D is equal to a half multiplied by 3 plus 2. Okay, so a half times 3, now over here, if I put this over 1, I can't cancel anything out when I'm multiplying these together. So it's 1 times 3 at the top is 3 over 2 times 1 at the bottom is 2. So I have 3 over 2 plus 2. Now I'm going to go and add those. So that's 3 over 2 plus, if I change it so that it has the same denominator, that's going to be 4 over 2. So that gives me 7 over 2. So your D value should have been 7 over 2. Then our E value, we have E equal to, so it's E equals a half multiplied by the input, which is 6, plus 2. So again here, I can think of this as it's half of 6. Half of 6 is 3, and you can work that out also by cancelling. 2 goes in there once, 2 goes in there 3 times. Okay, so it's 3 plus 2, which gives us 5. And then the last one is F. So F is equal to half multiplied by the input, which is 10 plus 2. So again, it's half of 10, which is 5, or you can cancel out 2 goes in there once, 2 goes in there 5 times, and that gives you 5 plus 2, which gives you 7. So your F value should have been 7. Okay, so that's what we should have got for all of those. Right, now we're going to go on to examples where we have to not just use rules that are given to us to be able to find values. Now we're going to have to find the rule and then use that to help us to find unknown values as well. So in this example, we've got a function that's been presented in the form of a table, and we haven't been given the rule. We have to first work out what the rule is and then use it to help us to work out the values A, B, and C. Okay, so let's have a look at how we would do that. Okay, so first of all, when you want to find out what a rule is for one like this, the fact that they told us that it's linear is actually kind of important because it means that it is a straight line. Okay, when you've got a linear function, it is a straight line. So you're not going to have any x squareds or x cubed or anything. It's just going to be x. So you don't have to worry about x squared or anything in your equation. It's going to be y equals something x, maybe plus or minus something. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to use the information they've given us. So here we need to use any complete sets of input and output values. So I have got the first complete set of input and output values is my -8 and my -2. Okay, so let's see, how do we get from -8, which is an input, to -2, which is an output. Now, there are two simple ways of getting from -8 to -2. I can either, from -8 to -2, I can either add 6, or I can multiply or divide, by 4. So those are my two options. I can either add 6 or divide by 4. Now let's have a look at our other complete set that we've got of x and y values. I've got over here 6 and 12. So let's see how we can get from 6 to 12, and we need to see which of the options is consistent for this set and that set. So to get from 6 to 12, I can do that by adding 6, or I can multiply by 2. So my consistent one here is the adding 6. It's the same for both sets. So that means that I'm going to have plus 6 in my formula. So it's going to be y equals my x value plus 6 to get my y value. Okay, so the input value, we take the input value and we add 6, and that'll give us the y value. So that's going to be our rule for this function. Okay, so now we're going to use that rule to help us to work out what a, b, and c are. So a is an output value, so it's going to be in place of the y in our equation. So it's a equals, and then my input value is -3 plus 6. Okay, so now let's go and work out what a is. So -3 plus 6 is +3. So for this particular function, if the input is -3, then a will be 3. Right, the next one, we have to work out b. It is an input value. So it's going to be our output value that they gave us, which is 6, equals the input value goes in place of x, so that's b plus 6. So now I have to work out what b is. So I'm going to subtract this 6 over here on both sides. So 6 minus 6 is 0 equals b. So that means that my b value is 0. Okay, and then c is an output again. So it's going to be c equals, and my formula again is x plus 6. So my x value for c is 11 plus 6, and that gives us 17. So if our input is 11, then c will be 17. Okay, so that's how you can use the information that's been given to you to find the rule. You have to take complete sets of input and output values and see what is consistent for you to be able to get from the input to the output values for the set that you've been given, and then use the rule to help you to find other unknown values. Okay, so now I'm going to give you a couple that you're going to do for yourself. Okay, so here's the first one you're going to do. This one has been given to you in the form of a flow diagram. You have to first find out what the rule is, and then you have to use that rule to work out the values a, b, and c. I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this question as well. Okay, so let's go through that and see what you should have got. So the first thing we had to do was we had to work out what our rule is. Okay, so like I said, you have to take a complete set of x and y values and see how you get from the x to the y, and then take another complete set and see what is the same in the two sets for getting from the x to the y. Okay, so let's have a look at our first complete set of x and y values. So we've got -6 and 18. That's a complete set. So how do we get from -6 to 18? We have two choices. We can either take the -6 and we can add 24, or we can take the -6 and we can multiply by -3. So those are our two choices. Then let's have a look at what our other complete set is here. We've got 4 and -12. So to get from 4 to -12, I can subtract 16, or I can multiply by -3. So the consistent option here is multiplying by -3. That applies for both of them. So that means that my rule is going to be y equals x multiplied by -3, which is -3x. So that's what you should have got for your rule. Okay, so now we're going to use that to help us to work out the values of a, b, and c. So a is an input value, so it's going to be the output, which is 30, equal to -3 multiplied by a. So I have to work out what a is by dividing by that -3. So I divide by -3 on both sides, and that means that a is equal to -10. So that's what you should have got for a. Then b is an output value, so it's going to be b equals, and then our rule is -3 multiplied by the input, which is -1. Okay, so now I'm going to multiply those together. -3 times -1 is +3. So your b value is 3. And then c is an input value again. So I take the output, which is -21, equals, and I'm going to put that c in place of x. So it's -3 and then c. So now I need to divide by the -3 to see what c is equal to. So -21 divided by -3 gives me c equal to +7. So that's what you should have got for a, b, and c. That a is -10, b is 3, and c is 7, using the formula y equal to -3x. Okay, so now let's go on to another question. In this one, you're going to do the same thing, but this one's been given to you in the form of a table. You need to find the rule, and then you need to find the value of a, b, c, and d. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this one as well. Okay, so let's go through that and see what you should have got. Okay, so first of all, we need to go and find out what our rule is by looking for complete sets of input and output values. So our first complete set of input and output values is where x is -2 and y is -6. So we need to see how can we get from -2, our input, to the output, which is -6. I have two choices again. I can either subtract 4 or I can multiply by 3. Okay, so let's see which of those will work for our other complete set of input and output values, which is where x is 2 and y is -2. So to get from 2 to -2, I can either subtract 4 or I can multiply by -1. Okay, so in this case over here, our consistent option is subtracting 4. So that means that my equation is going to be y equals our input value, which is x, minus 4 to get our output value. Okay, so we're going to be using the equation y equals x minus 4, and that'll help us to work out a, b, c, and d. So a is an output, so it's going to be a equals, our equation is x minus 4, x is the input, and for a, the x value is -5. So it's -5 minus 4, and that gives you -9. So you should have got -9 for A. Then B is an input value, so that's going to go in place of the x, where the y value is -4. So it's -4 equals B minus 4. Now I need to get rid of the B on both sides, so I'm going to add B to both sides, and that gives me -4 plus 4, which is 0, equal to B. So that means that B is 0. Then for C, it is an output value again. So I have C equals our input value, where our output value is C, is 7. So it's 7 minus 4, and that gives us 3. And then for D, which is an input value, we're going to have 7 again, because that is the output value where D is the input. So it's 7 equals D minus 4. And that, I need to get rid of the 4 on this side by adding 4 on both sides. There's going to be 7 plus 4, which is 11. So that means that D is equal to 11. So you should have got A is -9, B is 0, C is 3, and D is 11. Okay. Now we're going to go on to another one, which is a little bit more tricky because the rule is going to be a little bit more complex. So it needs to be given to you a little bit differently from what we've had in the last few, because in the last couple that we've done, it's either been adding something or subtracting something or multiplying or dividing. It hasn't been a combination of things that have been happening. We haven't had multiplication and addition happening in our rule. It's either been addition, or it's been subtraction, or it's been multiplication. It hasn't been a combination. So now you can get rules like y equals 2x plus 3, where you've got multiplication and addition. So now you need to know how to get those rules as well. It's very similar, what we're going to be doing here is very similar to what we did in the pattern section, where we were looking for a constant difference. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to see what is the constant difference, because now it's been given to us so that we have got consecutive input values. You can see over here, it goes -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Those are consecutive numbers, which means that they are counting, and we're not skipping out numbers in between them. It's not going -2 and then 0 and then 4 or something. It's counting in ones from -2 onwards. Okay, so when you have your input values that are consecutive like this, you can use the method that we used in the pattern section to find out what the constant difference is. Now again, because this is a linear function, it will have a constant difference. Okay, so we're looking to see what that constant difference is. So if I look over here from -6 to -4, I am adding 2. From -4 to -2, I am adding 2. From -2 to 0, I am adding 2. From 0 to 2, I am adding 2. So I've got a constant difference of 2. Okay, so what that means is I'm going to have, let's have a look over here. I'm going to have y equals 2x. Just like if we were doing patterns, it would be Tn equals 2n. The constant difference is multiplied by n. Over here, when you're working with a function, the constant difference is going to be multiplied by x. Okay, so it's y equals 2x. So if you've got a constant difference, you can only look for a constant difference if your input values are consecutive, like I said. So if you're counting in ones with your input values, then you can look for a constant difference like this, and you can multiply it by x. Then once you've got that, we need to check if this is the full complete formula. So let's have a look at any one of the input values that we've got over there. So if x is -2 and I multiply that by 2, what do I get? 2 times -2 is -4. So my y value should be -4. But what I've got over here, where x is -2, I have -6. Okay, so that's not what I should have if my formula is y equals 2x. Okay, so if I have my formula y equals 2x and I substitute in the x value -2, let's see what we get. So we have 2 times -2 is -4. But based on what I have in my table, I should have a y value of -6. So how can I get -6 if I've got -4? What I need to do is I need to subtract 2. So I'm going to subtract 2 over there, and then I can subtract 2 over here, and that gives me the -6 that I need to have. Okay, because my y value is supposed to be -6 if my x value is -2. So what I did over here is I added on an extra -2. I subtracted 2. So my formula should actually be 2x minus 2. Okay, now I could have done that with any of the input values that I was given. I could have done it with a -1. So if I had taken y equals 2 multiplied by -1, and I saw what I got for that, if it was just y equals 2x, then I would have got -2. But if x is -1, then y is supposed to be -4 based on what I have in my table. So that means I need to subtract an extra 2 to get -4, which is what I'm supposed to have. So you could do this with any of the input values that you've been given. But now here's an interesting one. I want you to have a look at the input value for where the input value is 0. Okay, so if I look over here where the input value is 0, have a look at what the output value is. The output value is -2, which is exactly the same as the extra thing that I had to add onto my formula. So if one of your input values is 0 that you are using to help you to get your formula, then you can actually use that output value and you can put that straight in to your equation over here. Because if I take over here y equals 2 multiplied by 0, that's going to be 0, but I'm supposed to have -2. So I need to have a -2 to give me that -2, which means that I had to subtract 2 over here. So then -2, because this cancels because it's 0, is going to be the same as what I have to put on over here. So if one of your input values is 0, then you can use the output value that goes with that 0 as the amount that you're going to add or subtract over there. Okay, so my formula over here, my rule, is y equals 2x minus 2. Now we can use that rule to help us to work out the values of m and n. So first for m, which is an output value, is going to be m equals 2 multiplied by x, which is the input value, which is 10 minus 2. Then I can work that out. 2 times 10 is 20 minus 2, and that gives me 18. So my m value is going to be 18 using this formula. And then my n value, n is an input, so my output value is -18. That's equal to 2n minus 2. Now I'm going to solve for n. I'm going to add 2 on both sides here. So that gives me -16 equals 2n. Now if I divide by 2 on both sides, I'm going to get n is equal to -8. So if my output value is 18, it means that the input value, which is n, is -8. So that's what you would get for that example. So when you're wanting to work out your rule where it's a little bit more complicated, you should be given it so that the input values are consecutive so that you can look for your constant difference, and then you can use that to help you to work out your rule. And you'll have to find out what you need to add or subtract to make sure you get the right output values. And then you can use that rule to then help you work out any other unknown values that you need to. Okay, so now I'm going to give you one to do for yourself. Okay, so in this question, you need to find the rule and the values of the unknowns for the following linear function. You've been given this function in the form of a table. You need to use the values that you've been given over here to help you to find the rule. And then once you find the rule, you're going to use that to help you to find the values of m and n. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this question. Okay, so let's go through that question and see what you should have got. Okay, so we're starting off with our table where you've got the input values, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and the output values 9, 5, 1, -3, -7. Now you need to see that the -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, those are consecutive, which means that we can find a constant difference with the output values. So I look at the 9, 5, 1, -3, and -7. Okay, now if I look for a constant difference, then from 9 to 5, I am subtracting 4. From 5 to 1, I'm subtracting 4. From 1 to 3, I'm subtracting 4. From 1 to -3, sorry, and then from -3 to -7, I'm subtracting 4 as well. So I have got a constant difference here of -4, which means I can start off my formula by saying y equals -4x. Okay. But now we need to go and check if our formula is complete over here, if there's anything else I need to add to it. So let me just quickly put my input values that go with this. So -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. So these are my input values that go with my output values, okay? So where x is -2, y is 9. Where x is -1, y is 5. Where x is 0, y is 1. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the 0 over here, and I'm going to check my formula with the 0. I'm going to say if x is 0, then it'll be y equals -4, because here I've got my formula over here. As far as I've got it so far, is -4x. So it's -4 times 0, and that gives me 0. But I'm supposed to have 1, which means I need to add 1 to that to get what I'm supposed to have of 1. Okay, so what that means is I'm going to be adding the 1 over here. So I could have just gone straight ahead because I had a 0 input. I could have gone straight ahead and added that over here. Okay, so my formula is negative 4x plus 1. So now I'm going to use that to help me to work out what m and n are. So m is an output value, so it's going to go in place of my y in my equation. So it's going to be m equals negative 4 multiplied by the x value, which is 5, plus 1. That gives me negative 20 plus 1, which is negative 19. So you should have got negative 19 for m. And then we need to work out n, which is our input value. So it's going to be our output value, which is 41, equals negative 4n plus 1. Then we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. That gives me 40 equals negative 4n. We divide by negative 4, and that means that n is going to be equal to 40 divided by negative 4, which is negative 10. So you should have found that n is negative 10. And that is how we find input values, output values, and rules for functions. Now that we've learned the concepts in this lesson, it's important to practice, practice, practice. If you haven't already got the worksheet that goes with this video, you can find it by clicking on the link in the description below. The worksheet comes with an extra exercise full of questions for you to work on to master the concepts covered in this lesson. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button so that others can benefit from it too. Also, be sure to subscribe so that you can easily find my other lessons, and hit the bell so that you will get notified about lessons as I upload them.